Thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Whether you're listening during your commute, while working out, or just relaxing at home, we appreciate you. Every download, every listen, and every subscription means a lot. Up next, the 12 Kyle podcast.
Why don't y'all take a look at that sign up there? See what it says? Cash for your home. You know what that is?
Billboard.
What are y'all, Amos and Andy? Are you stepping and he's fetching? I'm talking about the message, what it stands for. It's called gentrification. It's what happens when the property value of a certain area is brought down. Huh? You listening?
Yeah.
They bring the property value down. They can buy the land at a lower price. Then they move all the people out, raise the property value, and sell it at a profit. Now what we need to do is we need to keep everything in our neighborhood, everything, black. Black owned with black money. Just like the Jews, the Italians, the Mexicans, and the Koreans do.
Ain't nobody from outside bringing down the property value. It's these folks shooting each other and selling that crack rock and shit.
Well, how you think the crack rock gets into the country? We don't own any planes. We don't own no ships. But we are not the people who are flying and floating that shit in here. I know every time you turn on the TV, that's what you see. Black people selling the rock, pushing the rock, pushing the rock. Yeah, I know. But that wasn't a problem as long as it was here. It wasn't a problem until it was in Iowa and it showed up on Wall Street where there are hardly any black people. Now, if you want to talk about guns, why is it that there's a gun shop on almost every corner in this community?
Why?
Tell you why. For the same reason that there's a liquor store on almost every corner in the black community. Why? They want us to kill ourselves. You go out to Beverly Hills, you don't see that shit. But they want us to kill ourselves. Yeah, the best way you can destroy a people, you take away their ability to reproduce themselves.
Yeah.
Who is it that's dying out here on these streets every night? Y'all.
Yeah.
Young brothers like yourselves.
What am I supposed to do? Fool roll up, try to smoke me? I'm gonna shoot the motherfucker if he don't kill me first.
You're doing exactly what they want you to do. You have to think, young brother, about your future.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. Man, check this out. On this episode, what I want to talk about is gentrification. Gentrification for me, it really starts at home, literally and figuratively. So I want to start this episode by talking about home. About a month or so ago, I made a trip back to my hometown of Florence, South Carolina. And it's always great to be home. That's where I grew up. That's not where I was born, but that's where I grew up. And that's where, my roots are, right? And I was very much amazed, and it's something I've seen over a period of time, but I've been amazed each time that I go home how my little town has grown. It has grown by leaps and bounds in a lot of different ways. And there's a level of joy in that. There's a level of happiness in that. There's a level of pride in that because Florence is a relatively small place. It's a small place on the map, but most people know where Florence, South Carolina is if you come through South Carolina because it's the halfway point on Interstate 95 between New York City and Miami. It is also, roughly about, an hour drive from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. But again, it's home. It's not where I live. It's not the place where I've lived the longest, which is Atlanta. We'll talk about Atlanta in just a few. But it is home for me. It's where I went to high school, where I spent my formative years. I have not lived there since 1991 when I left to go off to college at South Carolina State University. But it is home. And when people ask me where I'm from, I say Florence. That's where I'm from. In saying that, this recent trip just reminded me just how much Florence has been affected by gentrification. And it wasn't something that was lost on me. It's just something that kind of was really presented to me even more so on this past trip that I made home. So just to give you some background, if you go to certain parts of Florence, they look like a bustling little city. If you go to the south, what we call South Florence, the south side of the city, very much so. South Florence is popping. There's restaurants, there's buildings, there's all types of things that you can get into and get access to. If you go to the west part of the city, West Florence, much of the same. Particularly as you're going out toward Interstate 95 and Interstate 20. A lot of commerce, a lot of different things. The civic centers out there, the malls out there, the whole nine. But if you come to the north side of town, North Florence, which is where I grew up, it's different. And it's even more different in East Florence, which is also where I grew up. I spent my early years until I was in the 4th grade. Well, actually, no, until I was in the 6th grade in East Florence, pretty much. And then we moved to North Florence for my middle school through high school years. But what's interesting is and I made the comment that South Florence and West Florence look totally different from the areas that I saw when I was growing up. But if you go across that bridge and you get into North Florence unfortunately looks the same as it did in 1991 when I left. There's an area of downtown Florence that I want to talk about. And I want to paint this picture for you. There's an area downtown, and I remember this area very vividly as a child because there's a street that runs through the middle of downtown. It's called Dargan Street. Dargan Street was always an interesting place because I always heard stories as a child about Dargan Street, and there was a section called the Block. And this section of the Block, it was very famous or infamous, in the black community in Florence because it had everything that, you would want as far as that particular time in the 70s and 80s. Well, definitely, let me back up. Definitely the 60s and 70s. I didn't get here until 72. And we didn't move to Florence. I was born in New Jersey. We didn't move to Florence until 75, right? So, but I remember hearing stories about things that happened in the block, and the thing is about the block, it was a black section where black folks hung out at. There was pool halls, there was barbershops, there were liquor stores, places where you could find just about anything. I'm pretty sure, I wouldn't be surprised if there was back in the days where you could run numbers and probably get a little action on some hookers if you wanted to. This is my guess. I don't know. I wasn't here in 65. But I will say it's where my mom grew up. So my mom probably could tell the stories about what, happened in that area. But I do know that, it was, like I said, a place where you could have and get whatever you wanted as far as your vices were concerned. And I do distinctly remember how it was explained to me that my maternal grandfather, Eddie, he would get paid on Fridays. He worked on the railroads. He would get paid, and he had to, when he would walk home, and on his way home, he had walked through the block. Well, again, the block had pool halls and, gambling spots and, a little bit of everything, barbershops, liquor stores, bars, all of the whole nine. And so the story was told to me that my grandfather would walk home. He'd get paid on Fridays. And there were several times where he would get paid at noon and he wouldn't get home until 5 o'clock in the afternoon or early evening. And he's got a check. He had a check when he left work. But by the time he got home, he had like $5 left because he had spent it all at the pool hall, at buying liquor, because he had a really bad alcohol problem, drinking problem, whole nine, right? So that's the type of environment that it was. And so even in saying all of that, it's frustrating to hear, but that's part of the lore of the hometown. And I remember distinctly going down Dargan Street, and there was a section, and my mom pointed out to me specifically, there was a section and there was this building where there was a movie theater, and she was able to frequent this movie theater as a child, right? And as she got older into, I think, like high school, of course, it's the Jim Crow South, there was a sign on the wall outside of the movie theater, and it said like coloreds upstairs. And then there was a sign that says, there was a water fountain, and the sign said white only. And so when they went to the movie theater, you could go to the movie theaters with white people, but the black people had to sit in the balcony. They couldn't sit down low, so which would have made interesting for to go see a movie to where you couldn't sit, downstairs. You had to go upstairs. But I distinctly remember her showing me that sign that said white only, because even when she showed me that sign, or it showed me where that sign was in 1978, the interesting thing is that sign was covered because, of course, you didn't have any more white only fountains anymore, water fountains anymore, but it wasn't covered all the way. So you could still see, if you look close enough, if you walked up on it, you could actually see where it says white only. And again, this is 1977, 78, somewhere around there. I was a little kid, but my mom told me those stories about my hometown. Dargan Street and Florence in general in the downtown area doesn't look anything like it did when I was in middle school or elementary school or even high school for that matter. It has been revitalized. There are several bars. There's a bar district. There's some restaurants down there. It is a party place. It is a place where each year, and I know you guys have heard me talk about my high school homecoming, Wilson High School in Florence, South Carolina, where we have our homecoming events. A lot of them are downtown in Florence, and it is a great place to hang out. It is a great place to kick it. It is very, chill friendly. I mean, like it's a great place to be. But the thing is that as I rode through Dargan Street and I thought about those memories of, my grandfather, or at least the stories that I heard about my grandfather, and I thought about the water fountain sign and sitting in the balcony, I was able to look around the streets that intersect with Dargan Street and see all of these businesses and these bars and these great places to hang out and stuff like that. And it made me think, like, we used to own a lot of this. When I say we being black people in Florence. And I can only speculate because I don't live there, is that we don't own a lot of that now. And it made me think a couple of years ago when I saw it for the first time, I really ended up scratching my head because I had heard about it. My friends were like, "Oh man, you got to go to downtown Florence, man. It's popping, it's cracking." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, we'll see." Because I mean, like I was tempering my expectations, but when I got there, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is really different." Like it didn't even look like the place that I grew up. And again, there was a level of excitement, there was a level of happiness, but there was also the reality that things had changed. Things had gotten better as far as what you had. I mean, like Florence was a place, and now is a place where people literally can come hang out. Like you can spend an entire Saturday afternoon downtown Florence bar hopping, and have it's a really nice party district, if you will. It's not Buckhead. Shout out to Atlanta. But for a place as small as it is a really good groove. I mean, like you can have a good time. But as things changed, it made me think and speak openly, like, how much of this could we have gotten? How much did we get? When I say we, meaning black people, like we owned a lot of that land. We frequented a lot of those places. We had stuff invested in these places. And when the businesses that were there went away and the people went away, because I'm pretty sure at some point in time, it was pretty much a desolate area. and I remember, shout out to my boy Jay Fresh. I remember his dad had an ice cream parlor like on the corner of Dargan and Evans. And it was amazing, and he ended up selling the shop. But I thought back to what if he had kept that shop? Well, part of the issue is that some kids like me, like Jay Fresh, we left Florence. I knew when I was in high school that I wasn't going to live in Florence. There's no disrespect to my hometown, but I knew that there wasn't anything there for me. I didn't think that I would marry anybody there. And so, are you feeling nostalgic for the golden eras of rap and soul music? If so, tune in to the Rap Soul Podcast. We are your weekly journey through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, spotlighting the music and the hidden gems that shaped the soundtrack of our lives. From the powerful beats to the soulful melodies, we bring you the best of the past with fresh insights and stories. Rediscover the music that defined a generation. Subscribe to the Rap Soul Podcast and enjoy the vibes. If you want a podcast where culture, conversation, and life collide, where you get insightful commentary, engaging discussions, and a fresh perspective on everything, then you need to listen to the 12 Kyle podcast. Hosted by the one and only, yours truly, 12 Kyle, a voice that you know and trust. This podcast will bring you thought-provoking moments, compelling stories, and a whole lot of fun. Whether you're a first-time listener or just tuning in, each episode promises to be something new and exciting. So sit back, relax, join 12 Kyle, myself, and my guests as we break down the world around us and give you stories that you've never heard before, from nostalgic throwbacks to everything in between. The 12 Kyle podcast is a front row seat to this conversation. Subscribe now and never miss an episode of the 12 Kyle podcast, where the vibe is always real and the discussion is always worth your time. Yeah, I was off to college, and I knew once I got to college, that was going to be a different experience. And I knew that there were some places that I wanted to go and settle down. And Florence just wasn't one of it. It was always going to be home. It was always going to have houses there to go back to and stuff like that. And that'll always be there. But the flip side of it is, I think in leaving, I asked myself, did I leave some business opportunities on the floor? Did I fumble some proverbial bags that could have come my way if I had been there, or at least been around long enough to invest in some of these businesses? And it's not that I don't want the businesses to look the way that they look, but it's always good when you are from the community and you have skin in the game and you are invested in those businesses. And I think someone with a business mind and business acumen such as myself, I think I could have probably done a few things in my hometown. And I'm not saying I would have built like a casino or anything like that, but it made me think, just riding down those streets, like what would have happened if I had, kind of been plugged in. But you move away and you do certain things and you go to college and do all this. And I'm not the only one who's done this. Most of my friends that I grew up with, we don't live in Florence. I have a few that do, but for the most part, most of the crew, my whole crew, we left, and we still come back. Well, the exception of Jay Fresh. Jay Fresh doesn't come back, but it just makes me think, like, what would have happened if we stuck around? Does the gentrification happen the way that it does? And there's a level of disappointment. I don't want to say guilt, but I will say, just personally for me, there's a level of disappointment because I feel like I could have probably made some type of difference. And again, it's no disrespect to those, because we do have some Black-owned businesses downtown, but I could see a situation where we could have taken over all of the blocks and we could have made it look and sound and feel a certain way. And I think that's, part of the issues that we're facing across the country is because not only that, but even in the downtown area, it should look a certain way. But more importantly, when I move off of the downtown area and go into North Florence, again, North Florence looks just like it did in 1991. And that's crazy to me. But not being there, you're not there to tell the developers, tell people, say, hey, come over to the north side and see what we have cooking over here. Or we have this land over here. You can put something over here. And yeah, there's been a plant here and this over here and a grocery store here, but not the same. North Florence and South Florence look totally opposite. They look like two different places. They look like, on one hand, you got LeBron James, and on the other hand, you got, I don't know. What's the guy's name? Norris Cole. You know, North Florence is Norris Cole. And there's nothing wrong with Norris Cole, but it's like we still haven't had the development. And it's been 30 plus years. And, you know, I can't say that there wasn't an uproar. And there definitely should have been an uproar about the lack of development on the north side of town. And especially, well, if East Florence is just as bad, but I can only speak for the north side because that's where I live. It's just different. And it's frustrating because you see this happening everywhere. And I can move it further along to the city in which I currently live, Atlanta, Georgia. I love Atlanta. Forever, I love Atlanta. Been living here since 1997. I've lived here longer than I have anywhere else. And, you know, this is home. It's not where I'm from, but it's home. And it'll always be home to me. But it ain't my home. I think I'll always have a house here. I know I'll always have a house in Florence. I can't tell you, there's a running joke in the family that I said I wanted to retire in Florence and get me a house on Irby Street and just sit on the porch and watch cars go by. And part of me still really wants to do that. Now, my wife, Cherise, says she ain't going to Florence. She said, you go by yourself. Where I retire will be based on, you know, where my kids are, honestly. If the kids are here in Atlanta or close to Atlanta, I'll be in Atlanta. But if I decided to move to Florence, then that's where it'll be. But I've seen gentrification strike here in Atlanta as well. I mean, you have, I'm always amazed because I don't go downtown as much as I used to. Pause. My bad. Time out. My bad. That didn't come out right. I don't go to downtown Atlanta as much as I used to. But when I do go, I'm always amazed at half the stuff that I see. My wife and I just went out to dinner the other day, and we went out for our anniversary. And no, I'm sorry, we went out for Sharice's birthday. I'm sorry, my bad. And we were in this area in West Midtown, and it's like I was telling her, like, I remember, you know, like just maybe 10 years ago, this area of West Midtown was like crackhead central. Like all you could get crackheads and hookers. That was about all you could get in West Midtown. And now it's bustling with these skyscrapers and these buildings and these, they even got a name for it, like what do they call it? West Mid or something like that. It's something crazy. But it's like, it looks totally different. And then, you know, you expect cities to look a certain way, particularly major metropolitan cities like Atlanta. But when you move out into the suburbs, you know, it don't look the same. You know, the development doesn't come but so far. And a lot of times the development stops when it comes to black neighborhoods. Case in point, one of the main strips in Metro Atlanta is Memorial Drive. If you go on Memorial Drive, depending on which end of Memorial Drive you're on, it's going to look totally different. If you're on the downtown side of Memorial Drive, it looks totally different. But when you get through, if you take Memorial all the way through Decatur and then in Stone Mountain, it looks just like 99. Like nothing has changed. There are parts of Memorial Drive where literally the only businesses that have stood the test of time has been, you know, liquor stores, and Applebee's and the tire place. Other than that, there are no booming businesses. It looks very desolate. It looks like the people are just getting by. I mean, like they have stuff. There's a strip mall, liquor stores, churches. You got all the stuff that you would have in any other suburbs, but it just looks so run down and desolate. They built a gas station, and I was driving down Memorial Drive the other day, and I was like, "Oh man, look at this new gas station!" But even the new gas station looks bootleg when it's surrounded by a bunch of junk. And I say the same sometimes looking at my hometown. North Florence still looks the same. It doesn't look junky or anything. It's just there's no development there, and maybe the citizens from the north side should have been screaming for more economic opportunities. And I can't sit here and say that they haven't, because I'm not privy to those conversations. I wasn't there. I'm pretty sure that they did. But you have to have that money trickle into your community. If you don't, then what happens? Much like Furious Style said at the beginning of this episode, you will, drive the people out and then drive up the prices. And it's just frustrating. It's frustrating because I see and think that we can do better. And I think as a community, we have to command that we get more from our local, state, and federal government as far as the development around our communities. Because here's the thing, when it's time to buy a house, some of the things you need to look at. Where's the house located? What's around the house? Do you have easy access to grocery stores, to parks, to malls? Is all of that within a 1 mile radius? That stuff like that determines your market value of your house 5, 10, 15 years down the road. If you're around a bunch of liquor stores and fast food places, not a lot of development. The Chinese restaurant on the corner is not going to help you. I wish I had time to talk about how many Chinese restaurants are in black communities, but you don't find any black soul food restaurants in Chinese communities. That's a subject for a whole nother day. In conclusion, why is it important? It's very important for us to understand and recognize when we're being gentrified and pushed out. As a community, as black people, by the way, if you're not watching on YouTube, I'm black. Just in case you didn't know. But I think it's important because our black dollar needs to circulate, and it can circulate in our community if we build for us and around us. But here's the thing. If I have to leave the suburbs to go to the city to get a nice dinner, I'm wasting my time. Like, if I can't go a mile up the street and have a nice dinner in a nice restaurant, what are we doing? What does that say about the development in our area? That means we need more. That means gentrification has pushed things away and out of our realm to where we're used to it. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Going down the street and getting lemon pepper wings is cool, but I don't want to eat lemon pepper wings every week. Some nights I want to go do dinner with my wife, and that's it. And just the two of us, and have a nice glass of wine, nice steak, and spend a couple of dollars and come on back to the crib. And I shouldn't have to go into the city for that. And don't get me wrong, like, I don't live far from downtown. I mean, like, it takes me 20 minutes to get downtown, if that, depending on the day and the time. I literally live like 8 miles from the city. But, just like any other city, it's traffic, it's all the stuff going on. But I think it's important for us to push back when we're being gentrified. I think about Florence a lot. Particularly when I'm home. Was there some business opportunities that me not being there, I missed? Are there meetings, Chamber of Commerce meetings where we should be at to discuss our frustrations about, the liquor stores in our communities, or, the minorities that come in and buy businesses. We should flush them out. We have the economic dollars to do so. We just have to be mindful of that stuff, because sometimes you can socially condition yourself to think that because it looks a certain way or is in a certain part of the city, that is better. And no, my green's spend like everybody else. I got money. So I can determine where there's a gazillion restaurants in the city for me to eat. I would like to have one that I don't have to drive into the city to go eat at. That's all. And I don't think that's a big ask, because if you live in Sandy Springs, you ain't got to go far to find something to eat, a restaurant to sit down and eat in. But if you live in Decatur, where it's greater, you just might. So all in all, every city that you frequent or the cities that you live in could be a Florence, or it could be in Atlanta. My purpose in saying this to you is, pay attention, stay active, stay involved, take advantage of any business opportunities you can to better and keep the money where it should be with us. And if you do that, then we can start generating even more wealth in our community, and it ultimately will be better off for all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. The podcast drops every Thursday and every Sunday at midnight. We're on YouTube. Check us out on YouTube, 12 Kyle Podcast. We're on all social media platforms, 12 Kyle Podcast. If you'd like to contribute financially, hit us up, $TWELVEKYLE on Cash App. And we also have merch. Look in the description box, click that link, and you can buy 12 Kyle Podcast t-shirts, hoodies, and coffee mugs. We got it for the low. And we have a new baby. It is called the Rap Soul Podcast. It is the intersection where we have discussions about rap, soul music, hip hop, and R&B from the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. It's the best music podcast that you've never heard. So please, ma'am, please, sir, check out the Rap Soul Podcast. New episodes drop every Monday. Again, that's going to do it for me. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000. Yeah.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 12 Kyle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with a friend who needs the 12 Kyle podcast in their life. Every listen, every download, and every share helps us grow. Thanks for being a part of the 12 Kyle podcast community. We appreciate your support. We will catch you next time. 5,000.